A lot of people say, oh, we need to fix culture. We need to, we've got a problem with culture. And I always say, well, culture is like a shadow. You can't grab a shadow. You can't just, try to change a shadow. You can try to change the elements that form that shadow. So you need to look at it. What is it that is reflecting that culture that you don't like or that you wanna change?
Womanjeka. Hello. And Womanjeka means welcome, but also to come with purpose in the Woiwurrung language from the Wurundjeri people. And that is where I am coming to you from today here in Naarm in Melbourne. I would like to acknowledge that Indigenous communities have been custodians for our lands for millennia, caring, advocating for the well-being of people, of place, and of planet, and understanding these unbreakable elements and links in what is essentially determining our future. And so as New 21, acknowledging this and acknowledging our commitment to making our work better for a new world, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which we live and work globally. Last week was Reconciliation Week, and the theme for 2024 for Reconciliation Week was now more than ever. And I guess I'd love to extend that theme to encourage us all to listen, to really, really listen. And not only in our efforts towards reconciliation, but also in our acknowledgement of what is currently Pride Month. And Pride Month is, for the month of June in Australia, a celebration to recognise the influence of the LGBTQ plus community and celebrating diversity, celebrating people's right to live how they choose without discrimination. And essentially Pride Month promotes positivity and equal rights. So, and this month it's about this year, the theme is future. So I guess I just wanted to connect us all into these two parts as we embrace diversity, as we embrace, I guess, humanity really, and understanding there is a lot of heaviness in the world right now. But if we all come into the space to listen, to contribute on the chat, and I guess just to really critically think and engage on how we can shape the future we want. And for us at New 21, that's all about making work better for a new world. So welcome to the Culture Can't Be Fixed event series. This is number 3. We started 2 months ago on the busyness trap. We then jumped into hierarchy, schmierarchy. And now today we're going to center the conversation around leadership, and in particular on the theme of subtle leadership. Then next month, we're going to jump into customer-centric culture. And our final event for this season will be on innovation and AI. But bringing us into, I guess, who we are, New 21, we're a consultancy and a product studio. And as I mentioned before, we believe in making work better for a new world. And we do that through creating unstoppable organizations through our work and our different practices. And that's practices around leadership, innovation, product and service design, agility, and change, and AI. So that's a bit about us. For those of you that have previously listened to these events, they are hosted in conversation events with Eduardo and a guest from our team. So a teammate, a guest, it seems weird saying we're guests, whatever, we're all here together. And it's really a beautiful in-conversation format. So we would love for you to chime in with any questions that pop up as the conversation unfolds on the chat. And I will pop back and join Eduardo and Martine to facilitate that conversation when we have the Q&A section. So before I bring Eduardo and Martine up to the stage, to the beautiful virtual stage for this in-conversation event, I guess I just wanted to share with you all that at New 21, we actually only have one value. And that one value is the value of love. And it might sound all woo-woo and wishy-washy, but it's really about love for our customers, love for our people, love for our planet, and of course for our craft, for the work we do. And love has a tougher side too. Love is all about sustainability of our business, sustainability out of our customers' business, saying no to work that's not going to set us or our team up for success. And I guess for love, thinking about love and why I brought that into the introduction, we are a continually evolving organization ourselves. And it's because of this love for transformation and looking at the system and looking at what drives us in our work that enables us to continually grow and evolve our organization and our approach. And one of those things is our approach as leaders, not only for ourselves as leaders of this business, but for ourselves in terms of the leadership work we do for our customers. And so within that practice, we're continually evolving the way we think and relate. And so I'm going to invite Eduardo and Martine to turn their cameras on now, because I'm going to exit and bring Eduardo and Martine, two of the new crew, up to do a deeper dive into the art of subtle leadership. And I'm going to hand over because Eduardo and Martine are just going to give us a bit of an intro, have the conversation, but really ground us in this perhaps new concept for many of you on subtle leadership, which I think is a really interesting kind of juxtaposition in a way of what we think of traditional leadership having been. So Eduardo, Martine, I'll be back to throw some questions your way and see you soon.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
I was just thinking we should have played a joke, when you said, I'm going to bring Eduardo and,
Had different people.
No, not appear. Just a couple of minutes there, but no.
Can't leave her hanging.
Hi, everyone. She says no. Hi, everyone. I'm Eduardo Nofuentes. I've been hosting this series of events called Culture Can Be Fixed. And this came up, if you've seen the previous two, this came up, through a bit of an article we wrote about you can't really fix culture. It's the elements that form, the culture that you need to look at in organizations. And we talk, as Hannah said, we talk about prioritization and busyness. We talk about hierarchy and organizational structures. And today we probably want to talk about probably the one that impacts most culture in organizations, Martine.
Yeah, and I think that even with the two previous sessions that we've had, a lot of the questions coming in have been about leadership and people's own leadership, their experience with leaders. So I think that there's a tie-in for all of them there.
Yeah. So do you want to introduce yourself, maybe Martine? Or
yeah, sure. Martine is me. Hi. Eduardo and I have been working together for a really long time now. We met back in 2016, which, yeah, that's a long time ago. And I think that why I've been asked to come and speak in this particular session is that I'm spending a lot of my time with leadership groups now, spending time seeing how leaders are interacting with their teams, coaching leaders individually and as leadership teams on how they're working with their teams, and getting a lot of insight into how different businesses operate and run, and how leaders are so impactful in that in every day and everything that they're bringing forward.
Yeah. When we're with clients, when we're talking to clients, sometimes we get asked, what is the single thing that might kill or hinder the success of. Usually we get there to help organizations or teams become more adaptive or more agile or more innovative, and usually the answer is, well, like the thing that might get in the way or kill it is leadership. Right? So I don't know. We'll probably see many examples where that has happened, Martine.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because I see it all the time in a work sense, but the one that came to mind when we started talking about this was catching up with a friend the other night. And I catch up with her and some other friends for dinners every now and again. And it's a good story in the end, but I'll tell you a bit of history about it. Is we would catch up for dinners, and this friend is always saying, oh, work's, it's only okay. I've got all these restrictions. It's a bit hard. Like, I'm doing these campaigns. She works in marketing. I'm doing these campaigns. They're going okay. I'm not really sure what it is, but I don't really like my job. To the point that I was if I'd see jobs that I think would be good for her, I'm flicking them to her going, oh, would she be interested in something like this? And we had dinner just about a week or so ago, and of course, the usual, how are you going, how's things? And she just said, I am so happy at work. Like, what's happened? How did this happen? Because you're never like this. And she said, well, I've got this new manager and my campaigns are going well. I'm in control of my budget. The team is really happy. And she had this really passionate way that she said, I feel so empowered. I'm finally empowered to do my job. I didn't realize before that things were so hard because I didn't have that trust from my leader. This new leader's come in, and from the word go, he said, well, this is your job. You go and do it. And she is having the best time. She's loving it. The business is more successful in her area. It's happy times.
We think about, all the elements that can change or improve, or culture and all structures and business and prioritization, all these things we talk, and technology, which we'll talk about it in the last of this series. But probably the one single one that affects most people every day is that leadership, is that one-on-one relationship with the manager. You use the word manager, yeah? Is that what's probably more influential in terms of the culture of a place, right?
But we always see these posts that people don't leave their job, they leave their manager, right? It's right. The person that they're working with that is so influential in their experience of work.
Yeah, absolutely right. So Hannah has touched on this concept of subtle leadership, and I think she's sort of, maybe let me tell you a story how this came about, right? Like, because we in New 21, as if you follow us, you probably see that we try to do things that's slightly different, from an organizational point of view. We try to do what we tell our clients they need to do as well. So as Hannah said, we always try to question and interrogate ourselves. So this came up about a year ago, and it was more a personal journey for me, or a personal story for me. I've been leading, and I use inverted commas when I say leading, this business for about eight or 9 years now. And, with all our clients and everything that's happening in the world, I also started to question about my leadership style. And, is really what I'm doing, the right thing or the wrong thing, or, you question yourself. So I did, oh, hang on. Did you like that, Martine? And I did a very small survey or test with the people in E21, and I asked them to think about what was the word that they think about when they think about of me in terms of leadership. I said, give me 1 or 2 words, and there were beautiful words coming, and authentic and charismatic and genuine, and things like that, which were beautiful. And some people say stubborn as well, so that's good, no? But my wife, I was sharing this with her, and remember, this is coming out of COVID, so a lot of conversations we're having in the home. So she would hear me, talk a lot with the team, and she said, "I think you're very subtle." And I went, "Well, that's an interesting concept, right?" And I jump on Google and jump on the internet, and I Google subtle leadership. And there's not a lot about it, but I did find one article that was written by a lady in Puerto Rico. And it was a white paper about subtle leadership. And I think she'll be happy we share that white paper, if this is something that resonates when we share the video as well, right? And I love the concept. I love the way she had sort of described what was just a word for me, right?
Which I think is important to see what's described behind it, because having known you for a long time, subtle is not the first word that would ever have come to mind.
How so?
And we just see a lol from Ben, who's also known you a long time, right? Like,
Yeah, and probably that's not how I would have described myself either
yeah.
8 or 9 years ago, right? Like, and this is that part of that personal journey that I was talking about. You know, I probably came to believe that leading, you know, you needed to be that charismatic and visionary and almost solving everything for everyone all the time, what we call the hero archetype, right? So I had to embody those things, but also be the servant leader at the same time, the authentic leader at the same time. It's like, fuck, this is all very confusing, right? You're trying to be, you know, too many things at the same time. And you sort of, you catch yourself when you're in one side or the other. And I guess that's part of the growth, right? So yeah, probably people that I was leading 8 or 9 years ago would probably say, no, you're none of these things, right? You're probably more on the narcissistic, you know, side of leadership. But yeah, I guess probably now you can see some of those aspects of subtle leadership, or once we start describing them, I guess you'll see them. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, and that's the other thing, credit where it's due, right? That is the journey of you over time, and having spent these years with you, it has been a change and a difference. And when we uncover what's behind this subtle leadership, you kind of see it does explain a lot of what you've been doing in your own journey without having the word for it.
So I am very passionate about this concept, as you can see. As I said, we'll share that white paper, and hopefully we can create a bit of a movement, because it's a very new concept. So I'm just going to try to explain it, if I can, in 2 minutes, if that's okay. So we all sort of, what are my understanding of the concept, right? But if we think about leadership, about influencing others, right? So we're talking about leadership is about influencing others. And you do that through two types of power. One is what's called the formal power, and the informal one. There's three types of formal power. So the first one would be the coercive power. So, you know, threats, or, you know, things like that, which, you know, hopefully no one here in this, you know, in this webinar will be saying that that's the right one. The second one is rewards. So, which is more common. So it's about more incentivizing, you know, like if you do that, you know, you'll get a bonus, you'll get a commission, you'll get this, right? So reward. The third one is the most typical, I'll say, in organization, the position, right? Like the power, because I am the manager, because I am the leader, all right? Which is probably the most common one. So these are the formal ones. And then on the other side, Lewis talks about the other two types of powers. One is the expert power. So the expert is about, because I know the most about this. So in organizations or in projects, we'll call this subject matter expert, right? It's like, you know, subject matter expert. He knows that system. So bring that person. Hey, Johnny, should we do this? And the fifth one, which was completely new until I started delving into this, is what's called referent power. Referent power that comes, it's more about your traits, how you show up, your values. So more about who you are. So you're able to influence others in the organization, not because your position, not because the rewards, not because you're coercive, not because you're an expert, but most based on your values, who you are, how you show up. I'm going to stop there for a second. Yeah. Hopefully that's clear. So then Luz talks about subtle leadership as the one derived by referent power. So you become a subtle leader when it's less about position, reward, coercive, subject matter expert, more and more about how you show in the business. So this I've been thinking about this for a year, and this, has been my head for a year.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept because the other types that you talked about, there's a few things that come up, and in particular that expert one, because we see what happens typically in organizations is that people are being put into leadership or management positions because of their technical expertise. They're
Correct.
promoted because they know the most, or they've been there the longest, therefore they know the most about the business or the role, and they get put into this position of leadership because of that, but not necessarily having the leadership qualities to bring a team along with them.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely right. And this also make me think about, ourselves, our organization, how do we structure ourselves, and is this the right type of leadership in the new world of work that we've been living for a while now, and that we're getting into, at the moment, right? Where autonomous teams get formed. We talk about it in the hierarchy organizational structure was, right? So we were saying, well, we should create teams as the work goes, right? And have continuous fluid structures. That's the concept that we've been talking about, we've been using. So then how does leadership go with that? If you're constantly changing structures, if you don't have the boxes, if you don't have, the hierarchy, how does leadership then operate? And I thought that this referent power and sort of subtle leadership concept is probably the answer to that. Because even as a former leader in an organization, you can allow that to happen. You can set up a system where leadership emerges as the work changes or the structures changes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there is some real sense in that with the fluidity of what was talked about in the last session, because it is just that. How do you have that fluidity of hierarchy if you're going to keep moving things around all the time? And the way people show up seems to be, makes sense as how to still get leadership within that fluid structure.
That's right. So this is where it gets a bit meta, right? Like, because you need the former leader to allow it, and you need the people in the team to take it, right? To claim that space, right? Now, can I talk about you now? I've talked about me, now I'm going to talk about you, Martine.
Sure.
But we also did this experiment at NE21 just recently. Like we did a bit of a survey. We were questioning about our culture. Lots of questions about our culture, but one of the questions was, who is your go-to person in the organization? I'm not too sure if it was worded, but that was the concept. Who's your go-to person in the organization? And Martine, my colleague Martine, came up like 85%. Well, do you remember the result? It was like crazy.
Yeah, my phone rings hot, so yep, it's a high number.
So Martine was the sort of the highest by difference per go-to person in E21, which to me was a beautiful example of what we're talking about, referent power and subtle leadership. Can you I'll explain from my point of view what I think, but can you explain from how you see it?
Yeah, I think that there's something in because on one hand, it wasn't a surprise to see a result like that because my phone does run hot. But on the other hand, it is a surprise to see it because you kind of don't always see and hear what's going on outside of. But I think if I think about the reason my phone runs that way is because I send it out the other way as well, right? I'm showing up in a way that is for the people. That's my background, a people person, right? And I think that, given where we've been at a business and the point in time that we ran that, I think that the way that I was connecting in with people and they were coming to me to seek kind of, whether it's comfort or guidance or whatever it might be, is kind of created this two-way place that just happened to be lots of two ways because it was with lots of different people.
Absolutely right. So the survey was done at a time where, you know, market conditions, probably a few months ago, where market conditions were down. You know, a few of our clients had canceled. There was a bit of uncertainty in the market. So people in our organization would have been a bit anxious or a bit, you know, unsure. And I think this is where this concept of referent power linked to values, personal traits, way of showing up was important. So Martine, as she said, we've known each other for 8 years, and you know, I know she's a very empathetic. She's a great listener. You know, she's got a lot of patience for everyone. So at the time, it made so much sense to me that people in the organization gravitated to her, and she took this sort of leadership position or claimed that space to support the rest of the team, the rest of the organization at a time where it needed. So again, that to me defined very clearly what we talk about by subtle leadership. Now, if probably would have, I don't know, but if we had done that probably a year before, when, you know, market conditions were great, we were growing a lot, you know, there was a lot about growth, and, you know, maybe someone more like Bia in our team, or, you know, or Sean, or I don't know, Andrew, you know, would have been more that person. And I think that's where my head went, okay, this is it. As a leader is about not trying to take those roles all the time, but allow them to come up in your team when you see that someone can perform or claim that space. So if you're a formal leader, it's about allowing that space to emerge and not trying to take it all the time, if that makes sense. Hannah, are we making any sense?
Hello.
Hi.
Making any sense?
I mean, I think so. That there's some good comments in the chat, and I really like Joe sort of commented earlier around, I love the idea of being passionate about subtlety, which I think is a really interesting comment, right? Because I mean, you know, if we think about the traditional forms of power and the charismatic leader and the follow me and the blah, 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 it's like, well, what are the other, so I guess I went with that comment on the chat was, what are the other things, what are the other subtle things we can become passionate about that actually contribute to a culture? And I think that's a really interesting kind of call out to, you know, like, what are the subtle, unsaid, unspoken, perhaps unnoticed, that we can kind of like fall in love with and draw out. There's another comment just around, it's actually really nice to have words like referent and subtle for us to discuss the more human values-based leadership that is so important. And so I think this is just a new lens on it, right? Which again is challenging that kind of command control, traditional you know, view. I guess one of the questions I've probably got is probably similar to the question that Fiona's just asked, actually. So I'll just take Fiona's one because it's there for us all to see. I'm curious around how we can be explicit in our subtlety, which is such an interesting, like, to help bring others along in the journey to a different style of leadership. And I guess that was my question as well, like, what are the ingredients?
Yeah. There's something there about challenging what the norm is, right? Because I think that, you know, one of the types of leadership Eduardo talked about before is reward. Like, it's so easy to put a reward over the top, or incentive or KPI, and let's change a behavior by putting some kind of incentive over it. This is the hard part, right? This is doing something that challenges it and does it differently. I think that there's something in, one, the awareness of it, but two, the acknowledgement of it existing in the organization. Like, how do we acknowledge that it exists, and how do we intentionally identify those people who might be more subtle leaders and celebrate that in a way.
Yeah, I agree. I will add, yes, and you just mentioned, like command and control, right? Like I think you mentioned Hannah command. I think everyone probably in this webinars will be already thinking command and control is not our style of leadership, right? So, but this is what happened to me. Like knowing that command and control is not the right way, I almost had this feeling that of duty and responsibility, that I had to be there all the time, that I had to be solving all these problems for everyone all the time. And that might be a personal thing. I acknowledge that, but I think there'll be a lot of leaders there that can resonate, right? You've given an opportunity and you feel that you are responsible for everyone. And I think that's the change. It's just thinking, I don't need to be there. I don't need to solve it. I need to be removed and smart enough to see when is my time to step in and when is other people's time to step in and allow for that to happen.
Yeah, I'm seeing that play out with the client we're working with at the moment, right? We're talking about leadership and how one of the problems that they're facing is that when they're trying to make decisions, or if something's happening, the customer issues come up and they're trying to solve for it, like everybody's kind of jumping on it and pulling everybody into the room, and everybody's got something to say about it. And actually what we're talking about is, how do we maybe have a few less people in the room, and how do we have the right people in here, and how do we solve this in a way that doesn't actually need the person in the topmost position of power to be making a call on it, and giving that power to people who actually know the customers really well, or know the problem really well, or have seen something like this before, but they've created this space where they're actually waiting for the most senior person to be the one to make the call. And we're trying to bring that gap back a bit by coaching with that more senior leader to talk about how can you let go. Yeah.
Yeah, like show trust.
Yeah.
The slowness of what's happening.
Totally. And, we talk about that trust being such an important ingredient in leadership. And there'll be things where, like, we can't fail, so let's make sure that we're doing things in a certain way. But there's so many safe to fail problems where if it doesn't work out the right way, whatever the right way is, if it doesn't work out, like, that's safe to fail and we can learn from it and we can do something differently. But somehow we've put all of our problems and things into the we must not fail bucket. We need to take some of those out.
I've got a question.
Sure.
How does subtle leadership show up in the negative? So I am a very open, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm pretty open. I'm just going to use me as an example because we might as well. But I'm sure, I know there's some subtle things that come across in my leadership style that probably indicate, I don't know, like unintended intended consequences. And I guess we're talking about subtle leadership as showing up and having, your values based and all that stuff. But there's always a shadow side to every kind of strength or every good quality. And I just wonder, I haven't thought about this. This is a total curveball, FYI. But I just wonder, it can be the negative too, right?
Well, yeah, if those personal traits or values are probably still in development, let's call it that way, that then probably will have an effect. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess it's acknowledging that we're talking about the subtlety, which means the very humanness, the very rawness. So we've got to watch for that other stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah. I see there's quite a few comments on the
There,
chat.
there are. And so one of the questions,
I do want to answer your question about how to achieve it.
yeah,
But do you want to check if there's anything on the chat that is
yeah,
worth?
yeah. So I guess there's a question around working alongside more dominant traditional leadership styles
Yeah.
and how.
So how does this work with more dominant?
Yeah, like what are some, and I guess this is from a you know, what are some strategies, what are some tips? You know, how do subtle leaders avoid, I guess, being overwhelmed by perhaps louder, more dominant, more technically promoted leaders?
Martine, any thoughts?
Yeah, for me, that's kind of trying to give people their space to shine too, right? Like, how do you claim the space that is your kind of style of leadership and have others have their space in it as well? I think there is space for all of it to thrive, because there'll be some people, you know, I don't want it to come across as critical that people are promoted because of their technical capability, because I think that that's relevant too, right? And there'll be people where that's really places where that's really valued and important. But I think the acknowledgement of the strengths of all of it needs to come through in some way. And maybe we need to give some of those, you know, don't want subtle to come across as quiet though, right? And it's not that they're a
Yeah.
quiet voice, but how do we make sure that all of these voices are invited in?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how this will, you know, will operate in a very, you know, command and control dominated leadership. I don't know. I think you need to find your space. I think it's different if you're a leader. You can control a little bit how you go about your team in a big organization, for example. If you're not, if you're a team member in the traditional sense, how you show up, still important, and find your place in the company you are or in another one. It's all about finding that space. To me, is when you have that formal power of authority, still you can make that change, right? And to me, is that is the leaders in the room or out there in the world that need to be thinking more about it. And if you want to, I'll go to respond, because I've been thinking about it, about how sort of what are the 3 or 4 things, you know, that you should be thinking about all the time, or I try to think about all the time, right? The first one is, to me, is this concept. It might sound simple, but to me it's like, you know, leadership is not about you. You know, I read a definition of leadership, one of those, you know, years ago, that stuck to my head, that said, leadership is about giving meaning to your life beyond your own ambition. It's about giving meaning to your life beyond your own ambition. To me, that summarizes, right, what leadership is about. It's not about how many team members, how much, you know, if I become a director or whatever, or a partner, you know, it's about what am I doing. That is not about how much money am I going to get with a new role, how's that promotion. So giving is not about you, number one. Number two is what you were talking about, Martine, in terms of you don't need to be achieving all the time. You know, well, we both talk about it. You're more from an expert point of view, you know, the expert that gets promoted, therefore the achievement comes from doing. And then what I was talking about, which is similar, but the other side of the same coin, about the sense of responsibility of duty. I need to solve everything for everyone, right? Like, this is where I think you need to catch yourself, if you're a leader, not to do that. You don't need to achieve. You don't need to solve everything for everyone, because then that allows you to the third thing, allows you to gain perspective. Like, if you're not achieving, if you're not thinking about, I need to solve every single problem that happens around me, you can step back and see the system. The system might be your team, might be the organization, might be your business. Like for us,
whatever it is, that system. And when you see the system and you use a little bit of systems thinking, you can see the elements much better. In this case, the elements might be people in the organization that is sort of claiming a space. And then you allow it to be, you allow it to happen. You allow people coming up, coming through when it happens. But if you're there, you're not going to see it. And the fourth thing, so leadership is not about you, not achieving all the time, systems thinking approach. The fourth one is about working on yourself, on your own self, on your own values, right? On your own personality, right? Like if we're talking about the referent power, is about those traits, those values, the way we show up. The more you know yourself, the more you evolve. I think
And I think that can get lost over time, right? Like the working on self and developing self. And it's came up for me really recently when doing some one-on-ones with executives. So like the most senior people in the organization. And there's a bit of getting to know them and understanding them and asking them about their leadership superpowers and their leadership Achilles heel. And one of the leaders said, wow, leadership Achilles heel. I have not been asked that question for such a long time. I've not thought about it. But even in that response, I found really interesting that they've gotten themselves to this position of power, and somewhere along the line, they're not thinking about what are the things that are holding them back from being a better leader. Because maybe where else do I go? I'm at the top. Where else do I go? So I don't need to work on anything else. So I think that development of self becomes really important, but sometimes lost.
So there's a comment in here from Elise around matching your leadership style to what the team needs. And so the comment is around, like, I consider myself a subtle leader, but at times my team need that decisive, like, clarity so that we can kind of get on with it. I mean, my view on that is you can still be a subtle leader and be decisive, but it's about how you show up and get that cut through to happen, as opposed to, I'm the boss, this is what we're doing, off you go.
So absolutely. So this is where I think the subtle gets a bit confused. That subtle doesn't mean that at times you can't be decisive, right? And decisive might be some of those traits that people admire in you as a leader. And that's a good thing, right? I think it's about, is this what the team needs now? And is it me the one that needs to be the decisive one at this point? Or is anyone else showing that decisiveness and I just need to allow that to emerge by itself? I will think about it that way. But I remember, I see you reading a comment. I'll finish my
Yeah, no, you go.
No, all good. I remember during COVID, or when COVID started, and I probably was already in this journey, Martine and Hannah, but like there was a lot of fear in our team, in our organization about COVID, what was going to mean. Probably that wasn't a time for me to let it, no, I'm going to rephrase the way I'm going to say it. Probably was the right time for me to step in and claim that space.
Yes.
Because that was what the team needed at the time. And for me to say, we're going to be okay, or this is where we're going, or this is what we're going to do, right? But those things don't happen every day. And is it allowing the team traits to emerge? I think that's the concept that we're trying to introduce here.
The comment I was reading
It's great.
from Joe in New Zealand. Hey, Joe. I think part of the shadow side of this leadership style, hold on, was that the top of the question? Yeah. I think part of the shadow side of this leadership style is that it risks falling into a prisoner's dilemma situation, where although a prisoner's dilemma, So yes, everyone's better off with the referent approach. Some will choose to win by pulling out the coercive.
That's deep. Not too sure how to answer that, but I guess, yeah, that's where you as a leader might come up, right? Like going back to, I think Lisa was commenting on the decisive.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I kind of interpret that is, well, where my thoughts gone actually is, if the system around you doesn't reward or acknowledge that claiming the space, that subtle leadership referent power, do you just default back into, oh, well, I've just got to pull out all stops to win? Because actually that's how our annual bonus performance conversation rolls, or like that they're getting all the accolades in our monthly awards thing, you know, and it comes back to the system, which we spoke about the last two, but we talk about it all the time, but the last two events, because it was around hierarchy and recognition and power and you know, all this kind of stuff that we've forced our organizations to do, but it stops kind of progress. It stops change in terms of the types of leadership styles that should shine through. So, I mean, it's a hard one, right? Like, we're not saying, yeah, cool, off you go, all be subtle leaders today, amazing. And then it's like, what?
Understand better what that is, yeah, which is introducing the concept.
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right there, Hannah, on the systems connection into there, right? Because what does it even mean to win? Like, how come the business is set up in a way that there is a win or an individual win, right? Like, that's something else in the system to look at, of why we set up that win is the goal.
And as win for my own ego, because I can take control and you know, like I'm the one that's stopping all the decisions getting through, because you have to come to me. And, you know, you brought up that example before, Martine. And then to win is, well, what do we recognize internally? Because if we're used to putting people on a pedestal, or a sales-driven culture, or, you know, all these other metrics that we put in, then of course you're gonna kind of default. What are you laughing at, Eduardo?
No. Enjoying the conversation.
Yeah, it's a much more philosophical conversation than a practical, here are the 5 steps to going and implementing right away.
No, you're telling me leadership is not simple?
No, it's not.
There's not a rule book that tells you how to be a leader?
I mean, there's a lot of blog posts about it.
I was going to say this before, but I couldn't remember exactly. But when I was talking about the 4th element or ingredient to become a leader, which is about getting to, I saw someone present. I don't know if to stop me or
no, keep going.
Talk about knowing yourself and your values. And Julian Waters Lynch, which is one of our collaborators and academic, and he's a beautiful writer. He wrote this, and I love it. He said, the path towards becoming a great leader then is less about adopting new techniques and strategies, and more about the journey of self-discovery and alignment with one's deeper values. And I thought that's probably defines very well what we're talking about here, right? It's less about strategies, right? Less about learning new techniques, and more about the journey of self-discovery and aligning to your deep values. Yeah, I loved it. Anyway, sorry. Is there any questions or
Very cool. That was great.
people that want to add to this concept?
Oh, there's been a lot of, I mean, we've sort of brought it into the conversation. So we're not missing anything, I don't think, but I'm sure we'll get some feedback afterwards if we have. What stops referent power?
What stops referent power? in organizations, in teams.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say when there is that space that is always claimed by someone, it's going to be difficult to allow for that referent power to come through, or subtle leadership through referent power to come through. You need to allow the space to happen, I'll say.
Yeah. Agree.
God talk.
Okay, Martine's emotionally.
I've got a frog.
I'm kidding. Got a frog in her throat. But I
Right.
agree, because it comes back to, I guess, what we were just saying. Like, that's the thing that's going to stop it. Letting others shine in this particular space where we've got a system that rewards and, you know, plays to win is probably the thing.
I'll go back to what I said before, and I'm very passionate about this concept, as you can tell, and it's very new. If you go into Google, I mean, we will share this white paper that was written by Luz Quiñones, is her name. But if you go to Google, you can find it just by putting subtle leadership. It'll probably come up as one of the first links.
Eduardo, why are you so passionate about this?
Because I think it's the way we talk about organizations, the way we believe organizations should run, with these fluid continuous structures, and and all the things that we talk about in terms of organizational development and organizational design. Leadership is so crucial to either make it or kill it, right? And I believe that this is a very close concept on how to make it work in organizations. This concept of subtle leadership, because it allows to those structures, fluid structures, to emerge, the work to flow, the prioritization, right? This is why I'm so passionate, because I believe might be the type or style of leadership needed for this new way of work that we've been going on for a while now.
Martine, if you can talk.
We'll see. Yep, a little bit.
Well, yeah, are you as passionate about subtle leadership, or is it?
I think I'm really seeing the power of it, right? Like how powerful it can be in impacting people's experience of work. And I think that's what I'm passionate about, is people's experience of work. And so if that can have an impact on it, then love it.
Agree. It sounds like you are like really emotionally choking up, but actually, Martine's just it went down the wrong way. A drink of water. So when I first read the article, I was like, oh, I don't know if I agree with this. But less about, like, once I read it, I was like, oh, okay, get it now. But to start with, I was like, and because my reaction was, I don't think we are subtle leaders. That was my initial reaction. And I was like, I don't think we are. But then as I delved into what it actually meant and what it is, then I do 100% see that we are embodying that as New 21, but also with our customers in terms of, the coaching work we do and the leadership work we do. But I think initially I had probably that reaction pre-delving into it that somebody else on the chat had, which was around sometimes I just need to be clear in the direction. And I think there's this really beautiful, like, I love it now, because I love the idea of like really delving into subtlety as a thing to be recognized and as a thing to be cherished and as a thing to be developed. And it goes back to, some of my opening remarks about listening. Like, let's all come into this space and really deeply listen, because listening will help us relate to ourselves, to each other, but also figure things out for the future in terms of new innovation, new ways of working, I don't know. But if we just keep carrying on the same, I'm not actively listening or deeply present, I'm just doing things the same way, the way the rule book showed me, the way I'm recognized in my annual performance conversation, then we're not going to get change or progress. And so to me, there's this really interesting privilege, I think, that we have to shine a light on subtle leaders or subtle leadership and influence that and create a movement. So it feels like a nice way to end, I think.
Well,
Take the opportunity, run with it.
Run with it. And maybe we can all just go ahead and start ourselves. So thank you for those tuning in and for those watching this, and Eduardo and Martine for holding space and having the conversation. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Amazing.